Welcome, everyone, to the final talk, Building for Massive Scale and Security with the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. You know, I'm just going to assume that I can keep you all. You're my captive audience. We've locked the doors. You can't get away, so you can listen to all my bad jokes. When I came up with this talk, it was not originally called this. Instead, from leadership, they said, make it more punchy, right? Make it more punchy, and thus the word massive came to be. So I was already introduced, but I'll introduce myself again. Cole Morrison, developer advocate. Been doing DevOps, cloud, software engineering for well over 10 years at this point. And this topic specifically has been kind of a pinnacle topic for me, pretty much the whole career. And if you're developer-oriented, you know, engineer mindset, we're always thinking about scale. So for this topic, it's something I've always been chasing because it's also how I want to do it. Now, this is scale. It's massive scale. And these are different things. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how they're different. It's not just more scale. It's scale many times over. Now, regardless of the size of company, you know, whether the budding startup or the Fortune level company, you're going to be able to get something from this in the sense that you're either going to learn about the guiding principles you should follow if you want to achieve massive scale, or it'll help you with your day-to-day if you're already in massive scale and perhaps don't know that. Now, you are on the cloud engineering track, so it should be of no surprise that this is for cloud engineers, just in case that was a surprise. But if you're a non-engineer, you will still get something out of this, because we're going to go through a lot of the conceptual architecture as well, so we can understand what it is, why it's inevitable, and of course, how to deal with it. This is also massive scale in context of the public cloud, in case you thought it was for something else, but just in case. And it's going to be using the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. Now, this is not because I'm a HashiCorp employee. I mean, that's part of it, obviously. But also because this is how I would want to do it. And quite frankly, scale and security, I've yet to see a tool on the market that didn't say that it could do those, right? So like, we just don't do that here. It's also because if you're part of our community, you know that workflow has always been sort of the focal point of anything we've done. And if we like the workflow, if we like what we're working on, we're more likely to do it, iterate upon it, and improve upon it. So how we're going to do this today is we got 5 sections we're going to go through. First, we're going to do the conceptual architecture. Then we're going to get into a live demo and technical implementation. Now, I've got 2 sections there, mainly because I had to. But we're going to flip between both the code and a live demo so that we can see what's going on in there. Again, this is technical, so we're not going to shy away from the code itself. And then we'll pull back out, and we'll see some extrapolation and extension in context of what you can do to repurpose this of your own. So let's go ahead and hop into it here. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to start 0, and we're going to go to massive scale conceptually. And the reason why this works is if you're greenfield, that's what you got to do. And if you're brownfield, well, this is probably what you should do. If you're reaching for cloud maturity, it's going to be a lot more reasonable in the sense for you to take what you've already got with that new business function, sandbox it, right? And from there, link it back, right? This will give you a quick win. It'll show you some progress. You'll be able to try things out. And this will make more sense as we get into this. So it all begins with one sandbox, one cloud environment, with one end user-facing application. Let's dissect some stuff here. So by end user, I mean machine, human, internal, external. By app, I don't mean one piece of software. This could be one app backed by many different services. And by sandbox, I really just mean a blank slate cloud environment, in the sense that, you know, this could be an AWS account, a GCP project, or an Azure subscription. Obviously, for GCP and Azure, you mix in tenants and workspaces backwards. I was going to say respectively, but that's not it. Anyhow, whenever I say sandbox, just fill in with whichever cloud provider you're on. Now, when we get started as cloud engineers, regardless of which you've chosen for your sandbox, okay, we have 5 components we tend to have to build out here. It's going to be the infrastructure that everything sits upon, the applications we're ultimately trying to serve to our users, the networking that connects it all, the security that guards it all, and people, right? They're kind of important. The thing is scale often begins as doing more of this, just lots more of this. And this is generally when you encounter HashiCorp products for the first time. We start doing everything as code, right? We start trying to orchestrate our workloads and make our machine images consistent. We start trying to think about networking in terms of identity instead of thinking about it, in terms of IP or cherry picking, individual instances of things. Obviously, centralizing secrets workflows and remote access is important. And then, we get tired of tickets. We get tired of talking to developers in general. So we want to set them up to where they can go and figure it out themselves. The issue is when we start thinking that this is massive scale in the sense that we just do more and more of it. But that's not the case. Like I said in the beginning, massive scale is this many, many, many times over. Not only that, but it is inevitable. And the way it usually happens is you have some sort of business function, like a store, right? That kind of looks like a little Happy Meal box. I originally had a different icon, so that's very new to me. And perhaps you need to add some sort of telecommunication service or whatever. The first thing you might do, again, these aren't just singular apps, they might be apps with a lot of other ancillary services, is to crowd this all into one account. Now, there's some issues and limits here, some that you can't bypass. So those being whatever provider you're on, there's going to be API rate limiting, there's going to be limits in terms of how many resources you can make, and then there's the rest of it. There's the processes. If the processes in place for the store, for example, are specialized to help get that out the door fastest, and those might get in the way of the new service. So you might wind up compromising, or one team might be unhappy. So the natural next step is to break them out into their own sandbox, right? Giving the people their own ability to craft their own processes and technical implementation so that they can get done what they really need to the best of their ability. This, kind of what calling back to me saying this is how brownfield should start as well, this winds up working so well that this becomes the pattern for all new business functions and technical functions. And we'll talk about when you might decide to split those up later in the talk, but it works so well that we keep doing it. We go from 2 sandboxes to 10 sandboxes to 100 sandboxes to thousands of sandboxes, and we even have some people that have done like tens of thousands of sandboxes. It's a lot. And, well, this is massive scale. It is scale, is whatever you're doing in that one sandbox many, 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 many times over. And as you can probably guess, well, this is a massive problem. There's a lot more that we have to think about here. And it can be overwhelming if you're thinking, well, the 1,000 problems I had in one times 1,000, and I don't even know what the math for all of that would be, is crazy, right? You don't want to deal with that. So we need a different way to think about this. So there's really 2 things we can do to understand how to manage this. The first one is understanding what we need to do to any individual sandbox to make it a fundamental unit of scale, such that if I make a new cloud environment and I drop it in with the rest of them, it's pluggable, right, and it can consume and be consumed. The second thing is how we cannot think about managing them all individually, instead looking at an ecosystem or as a community and thinking, how do I manage the ecosystem? How do I speak to it in a centralized manner as opposed to managing and working with every single one of them? So let's start with the individual sandbox. And it's just got 3 guiding principles you need to build towards. I don't have an exhaustive list for each of these, but when I say them, it'll make perfect sense, especially when I give the example here. So the first one's isolation. So isolation here is just black boxing the functionality. If you have a shipping service on GCP and it needs to talk to payments on AWS, shipping should not care how payments on AWS works at all. It shouldn't need to know the inner workings. In fact, the more it needs to know, the more difficult it is for any given one of these to be pluggable. And obviously, being pluggable, I also mean they need to be connectable, which I had a lot of trouble deciding whether or not to put that word on here, because when I Googled connectable, no one seemed to be sure if it was a real word, so we just have connection. And connection isn't just like, is it a public or a private connection? It's also the protocol of like how they go about communicating. It's not just the protocol, it's also how easy it is it to drop one in, right? And that's why we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the networking pieces here in the live demo. And obviously, if we're talking about connection, we have the security of all of it. This isn't just encrypting the communications between it, but it's also like protecting the secrets within the sandbox itself, so PII, infrastructure, and application secrets. But again, this is about making it a member of an ecosystem, of a community, meaning we also need a way that we can get into it, make sure that we measure what's going on, figure out every single thing that's happening from a metric standpoint, but then also so we can reach back out to other data, other secrets that it might have to get a hold of that might be global, that all sandboxes need help with, or not help with, but need to access. If we have all three of these things in place, they become pluggable, and it's a lot easier to start making different cloud environments and having them all work together. Now, the ultimate example of a sandbox, if you think about this, is just a third-party service. It can plug in with anything, right? You have an endpoint, just a website, you go to it, there's ways to connect to it, you don't care how it works on the inside, and hopefully it's secure. But even if we get to this point, we still have the difficulty of, well, we still have 1,000 of them. So how do we think about them, managing them as one? What can we do with that? Well, the theme of this is let's centralize our thought process around them, centralize the workflow, centralize the interface in as much as we can. And that interface, for me at least, really, and in general, should be code. That's where we're going to start with Terraform up here at the top. Now, I'm going to try to avoid saying the names of our products every 5 seconds. So I'm going to really hone in on the workflow here. If you have one sandbox and you have a ton of code repos, well, now you've got many sandboxes and many, 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 many code repos. You're going to have to start thinking about how can we centralize where we run this code, where we deploy the code, where we test it, where we monitor it, where we look for drift. But not only that, you're also going to have to think about modularizing it. Making each one of these sandboxes can't be an arduous task. It has to be something you can do to where making the 101st one is just as fast as making the 99th one or further on. So, and everything, I'm going to say everything is code because everything else that you do, assuming you're working with the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, you can do right in Terraform, right? So everything is code. No matter what apps are running, they're obviously going to be on a server of some sort, whether it's virtual machine or container, and you have the machine and container images you have to deal with. Now, in a single sandbox, it's about keeping those consistent. Across many, it's about keeping that consistency even more. So ideally, we'd have some sort of central registry where we can reference those, tag them, version control them, roll back if needed. And from networking, well, within one sandbox, there's already enough problems in terms of trying to connect between third-party services, cloud services, and your own applications. So doing this across everything, the concept of thinking about this in terms of identity goes from a nice-to-have to a necessity, in the sense that ideally, I'd be able to say, I'm payments, I want shipping, and that be it. And ideally, as the administrator, the cloud and the platform engineer, I'd be able to look down on that and say, OK, I need to control access real quick without actually going and diving deeper. So this lets us stop thinking really deeply about the internals of the network and instead just start thinking about how things get to each other from a much more digestible standpoint, which plays back into that idea of making things connectable. Secrets. Kind of the same theme here. I mean, it's obviously very important, but we go from just trying to centralize where those secrets get access from one place to now trying to do it across all of these. And again, it goes from, hey, this is kind of nice, to now it is an absolute necessity, in the sense that we get an ideal world where we have one place where everyone comes in and authenticates from any standpoint. And again, if you're doing the sandboxes here, there's no way you're just on one cloud provider more than likely. You probably have many, so being able to come from anywhere is just as important. And then, of course, once you're in, getting the right authority to access the correct secrets, which I guarantee you there's probably common ones that sit across all of them. You're going to have common users that need to go into all of these different sandboxes as well, and you're going to want to monitor all of that. So one place, one central place for that. And then eventually, even though we're hopefully in a world of immutable infrastructure, and we shouldn't have to do this, eventually we're going to have to get into one of these sandboxes and target one of the resources and actually do something like SSH or get into the database itself. Ideally, again, one interface, we go in, we're shown the sandboxes that we can access, we're shown the resources that we can access, and we go forth. And then finally, obviously, this has sort of been a static picture. You get everything live the first time, great. But now we need to change it. We need new applications, new infrastructure. We need new pipelines. And we need to give those to the developers. If you thought ticketing was bad in one, well, across thousands, it's unmanageable. So this is where you're going to start having to head towards something more self-service, an internal developer platform of some sort. Now, hopefully, since we're at HashiConf, everyone can kind of line up with the logos there of what I was doing. If not, just probably someone next to you probably knows what they all are. But my whole point here is to emphasize the fact, well, two things. One, again, massive scale is inevitable. And two, if such is the case, all the problems I just listed, you're going to have to deal with. It does not matter. You're going to have to deal with them whether you decide to use the HashiCorp Cloud Platform or not. But the theme being, let's centralize the workflow. Let's centralize the interface so we can have a common language to speak to all of these sandboxes so we're not overwhelmed by trying to treat every single one of them individually. OK, so technical implementation was just a fancy way of saying Cole stands up here and looks through some code. So what we're going to do, we're going to actually take a look at what's required to build out a sandbox that deals with these 5 components, that follows these 5 principles, that connects up to the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, and is on AWS. And if that was in text, that would be a run-on sentence. But hey, get over it. And once we're done, we are going to see 4 sandboxes created from this. One's going to serve as this sort of global hub and a hub-and-spoke architecture, connecting 3 more that are exactly what you'd expect. 3 different AWS accounts that all have a Kubernetes cluster in them, running some applications, and how they're all using everything we just talked about. So this is the QR code to the repo that has a lot of code in it. In terms of details, although this is a demo, it's also somewhat of a reference architecture. When you're looking for, well, I want more details in terms of what's happening, they're going to be in here for sure. So if we could switch over to my laptop here, Cole will start rambling about code here. OK, we good? You see it? All right. Yeah, is it big enough? It's big enough. Everyone can see it. Go up, bump up a side, bump up. OK, Locky knows. OK, good. So I got 5 folders here: game, global, social, and store. All right, these just represent fictional services, if you will. And each one of those 4 map to an AWS account to prove that they are actually there. I'm going to flip through them. Oh, look, there's the storm, and it's a Kubernetes cluster. Look, here's the router. It's got a transit gateway in it, which we don't have to get into that. And then there's a social EKS cluster, and then a game EKS cluster. No, these actually don't have a social platform store or game in them. But it's mainly just to prove to you, hey, this is all there, and it's up and running. So this is following a monorepo pattern, and it's not because I'm going to start an idea war up here over monorepo versus multi-repo. This is here for learning purposes. Now, the way that these map over to it, coming back to that centralized interface, right, is obviously through HCP Terraform. We've got 4 projects up here, each of the projects representing one of those different sandboxes, and of course within them, workspaces representing the different workflows. Well, not the different workflows, but the different separation of concerns and order of operations. Now, obviously, I have my Stacks folks in the audience, and Stacks is something that you can do alternatively to this. But hey, we're showing what we've got right now. Now, the other thing about this is just to show off, not necessarily show off me, but what's happening in the product, is that anytime if we say go into the global project here, these different folders that map to the workspaces, you change code in one, it's not going to affect the rest, right? And that's just some of the power that you get here, thus keeping everything in one place so that we can monitor every single thing that's happening. Now, in terms of what we built, well, just to show you that it is live here, we have the 3 sandboxes, the game, social, and store one. These are each public services that are reaching up to some private services within their sandbox. Now, what I'm trying to also show here is we have some private services in terms of customers and comments that are actually reaching between each other, despite being in entirely different sandboxes. However, if you've done this before, you know that is not something that's necessarily easy to do, right? That's pretty difficult, but I'm going to show you how just within a few commands we get that all in. Now, in terms of building out EKS clusters, well, that can be a weighty task. However, the other benefit of keeping the one interface in terms of code as everything is if we go into, say, the infrastructure runtime. Here, we've got a whole EKS cluster built in 7 lines of code. It shouldn't be anything new if you're well-versed in Terraform, right? But it is to show and trying to drive a point here that the module isn't just for reusability, right? It's an investment that we took as a team to not hard code, but to put policy and the standards that we want in place. And the same thing for the network. And the reason I'm saying this is as we build new sandboxes, we need the ability to get them up quickly. If we modularize the big pieces of it, we can get those up and running much faster. So what we built here, if we click for description, as we are being asked to do here, we will see that we have a very important word here that's bar And this is not because of Kelly's game that she would like to play with sandboxes. But it is because it is a global application secret that all of the applications need access to. And so we have this over here in Vault. We have a very simple one secrets engine set up for a KV version 2. And here is our secret. So here I've just exposed this on screen, so have at it. The more important part here is that each of these Kubernetes clusters obviously exists in different sandboxes, and we have different auth methods for each of them, right? So this should be pretty familiar to you if you're with Vault, but this still, again, one centralized interface up into everything. And I just realized that I skipped a very important part, which was that this is all on HCP, by the way. I should probably mention that I'm not just showing the products here. And this is proof that it's live. Not only is it live here, but it's all coded up inside of our code here. So I'm scaffolding out HCP with HCP, which is kind of fun here. So we've got our Consul cluster, boundary cluster, and the HVN involved. So just proof that that's there. However, let's continue on. So we've seen the Vault aspect. We have the service mesh live. Again, these are all services across different Kubernetes clusters all in one place. What's really neat here is this comment service, as we saw, is being used by 2. We can go in and see that it is seen as a downstream, or it's got 2 downstreams here. We can go to intentions. And this, do you see how simpler this is to think about networking now? If I want to add something new, if I want to break my demo right now, I can just go in here and remove this, and it'll go red. I'm not going to tempt fate with it. You know what? Let's just do it. Let's just see. Let's just see if this does this. This might be a really bad idea, but let's try it. All right, here we go. Is this gonna? All right, here we go. So I've already messed it up, right? Great. But yeah, this is a much simpler. Yeah, here we go. Yay! I successfully broke it. Let's unbreak it now and go back. This is a much simpler way to think about networking, especially when it comes to adding in new services here. So why don't we go over to the next thing, which is accessing the EKS nodes in the different sandboxes. So just to show you here, we've got some different EKS nodes for each of the different clusters we might need to dive into at some point. Maybe less so for EKS, but this is a demo. So just to show you here, for all of these, dealing with multiple different SSH keys, dealing and managing jump boxes a lot. You've seen a lot of stuff from Boundary here. I'm already authenticated. So all I need to do now is just connect to it, connect to one of the targets, and here we are. We should be inside, of course. So this is one of the nodes. You just have to trust me. I promise that it is. We can hop back over, and of course, we've seen this before. We can see the session. I can come in here and cancel it, and I will get kicked out. Just a continued theme of everything's centralized. Everything is in one place, all through HCP. I'm touching all 3 of these sandboxes right now without doing anything inside of them. And if we need to make a new application, well, I'm going to hop over here into Waypoint, click Create Application, and I've actually gone ahead as the platform engineer and set up 3 application templates that deploy into each of the different sandboxes. So if we want a new service, let's just make one in the game one. We'll call this one New Game. I'm so creative here in terms of that. I was going to call Locky out, who's in the audience, but I will. You know what? Let's do it. Let's call this Locky. Create application, and we'll see this kick off. So now the application developers got this going. And obviously, you could customize a lot of other things, like change up the container image or allow them to change it up. I've got another talk where I did something very complicated with Waypoint, where you set up an entire CI/CD pipeline. That's actually in a Google Next talk I did with Kyle Ruddy. So if you're interested in seeing something more complex, check that out. But as we're waiting for this, we can see everything that's happening here in the background going on. We'll see some Kubernetes services are being made. And the way this works from the platform engineering perspective, make a module, add it to a registry, tell Waypoint about it, and then you're able to go and set Waypoint up such that your developer can go and make this application. So it looks like it's finished here, and we have deployed that into the game one. Let's go see if it is live by heading over into services. And here we go, Locky has joined. He has joined the service mesh. And now what we could do is go in and give access to whether or not the Locky app is able to contact, say, I don't know, all services. Maybe we only want to let him talk to customers. Right? We can do allow and deny, all without, again, me needing to hop into any one of the individual sandboxes. OK, so we'll end on the console part there. If I can head back over to the slides. So kind of the whole point there is we had 4 AWS accounts. Granted, one of them was mainly there just to connect everything, but we stayed just in HCP. And that was just to look at it. In terms of managing it, that was all really done in the code. And for the code, as long as you modularize it, it's even less. And yes, we did see the project workspaces, but you could, of course, go ahead towards stacks and have even less thought that you have to keep in terms of context, order of operations, and separation of concerns. Now, in terms of repurposing this, all right, there's 3 things you really need to think about, and one of those is going to be how you go about creating those sandboxes, how you go about giving them out. So on one very far end of creating these sandboxes is all resources from ground up, right? You don't want to do that. You move over a little bit, and it becomes about modularity. Let's package together building blocks that have all of our standards and build from there. You go up the continuum a little bit more, and it's a self-service platform, which we had a little bit of. We contained that to just applications being deployed by our developers. But now that you've seen that it really is just a Terraform module, well, you can go really far, and you can start scaffolding out entire bits of infrastructure in general, right? You can go as far as templating out accounts. Now, as I said, you also have to think about how you're going to go about when you make a new sandbox. How are you going to split these up? By business function, by technical function. Right? If you do business function, is it just going to follow your product lines? It's going to follow just sort of a centralized function. It's kind of like how we have HR, IT, and the like, helping out a lot of the other ones for your individual apps. If it's technical function, how are you going to make it so it doesn't become the dirty sock drawer architecture, which is just like all networking, all apps, right? Once you get through that, you're going to have to think about the actual technical aspect of it itself. If you go with modularity, how big do modules get? How small do they stay? If you go with templating out full sandboxes, how are you going about doing that? Is it going to be template repos, say on GitHub? It's going to be some sort of forking model. And then you also have to think about the fact that what happens when those underlying base resources change? How are you going to propagate those changes back up to everything else? But assuming you follow what we did in the live demo here, where we kind of made those decisions, hopefully it's kind of obvious how we decided to do those, it really does just become, OK, I'm going to make a new account. With that account, I'm going to hook it up through HCP Terraform, make sure it's got the right credentials. I'm going to use those modules to build out a new sandbox, and we're good to go, right? And then the next evolution of this is probably building out those templating modules for GCP or Azure or whichever cloud provider that you're headed towards. And your workflow won't change as a platform engineer. If you're doing it through HashiCorp Cloud Platform, you're still able to interact with them the exact same way as if you were just working with one. And what this gives you, of course, is everyone with their whatever app they're working on, whatever sandbox they're in, they're able to continue working in terms of specializing to the applications and the processes and the technological implementation it needs, while you still get one workflow. Now, in terms of wrapping this all up, since I've only got a minute here and the thing is blinking at me, it can be difficult as an engineer, as a singular engineer, to see beyond scale, because we've got one account, that account's got tons of apps, got tons of networking, tons of other resources inside of it, and hey, there's also 100 other people that are doing this simultaneously. So it's usually not until we get some external force in the form of like a platform team, right? Maybe just pure necessity from the business, right? Or maybe your manager just says, hey, we need to figure this out, that we actually start seeing that beyond this, there is massive scale. We've got to figure this out. And obviously, the HashiCorp Cloud Platform is what helps us start thinking about massive scale as that one idea and giving you these centralized workflows so that you can manage all these different sandboxes as one. And the best part about this is you can use these no matter what stage you are in your journey. They will evolve with you in the sense that even if you're just at scale, when you hit massive scale, this workflow can stay the same. All right, so I've got some resources up here for you. The developer website, the official website, signing up for HashiCorp Cloud Platform, and then the reference architecture there at the end. And I believe that is it.